Right. So, hello everyone, and welcome to our 12th session, 12 talks, and the fourth session regarding the Azure Governance series. So today we'll cover not only the resource consistency discipline, but also some of the very excited announcement from the Microsoft Build event. Just a quick recap about the agenda. So, as you know, last week we had a few days of, I would say, really exciting announcement, especially in the AI field. Microsoft Build, in the past several months, everybody is focusing on AI stuff. So as you can imagine, the majority of the updates on today's session would be at some extent connected to AI, even that we still trying to segregate them around the different domains. And then, as I mentioned, we'll continue with the fourth discipline of the Azure governance, which is part of the cloud adoption framework, and we'll be in deep diving a little bit more in the resource consistency discipline. So, quick introduction from our side. My name is Nikolai Markov. I've been working in IT for more than 20 years. My main focus is helping large enterprises transforming their way of doing business by leveraging the cloud and recently the AI technologies. And I've been part of multiple transformations during these 20 years, so I can consider myself that I have a lot of experience of navigating our clients in these journeys.
Okay. Most of you have already been on the previous session, but just a brief introduction. My name is Nikolai Panchev, and I've been focusing specifically on Azure and M365 for the last decade or so. And just like my colleague, we have built up significant experience working on different projects for cloud adoption, and as well as in the collaboration space. So let's dive in.
Yep. So starting with the Microsoft Build update. First, on the Azure side, we've been talking a little bit more about the Azure AI, Microsoft Fabric, Azure deployment environments.
Yes, and as usual, we have some updates around M365, most of them related to AI, maybe with the exception of Mesh, which is kind of in between. As far as the Power Platform goes, we have some announcements around AI and Power Pages, a service that you can create websites with. And another thing that I noticed that I found very useful, if you're coming from the field, you would know how we missed actually a built-in catalog in Power Apps for Power Apps and other components that can be reused. So that's been announced in preview. And as far as there were other updates on the security front on Build, but this one specifically caught my attention around the external identities, because this is a major factor when you're building up security, how you're going to manage this. And Microsoft announced some new interesting topics around that. So if you're going to show.
Yeah, and talking about the security, so as we discussed previously, we'll have one more session next month, which will conclude the Azure Governance series. So we'll be talking about DevOps part of the governance, and then, as we said multiple times, starting from September, we'll dive a bit more in the security part, where we'll start covering the Defender. So that's why we didn't include the security copilot in today's announcement, because we would like to have a much more deep dive and separate session about it.
Yeah, I think as we get our hands on the different previews around the Copilot. Because there's so many Copilots, even on Build, they were announced. Now it's not only the ones that we already knew, but new integrations with AI have been announced. So as soon as we get access to these, because most of them are in closed previews right now, we'll share some experience over the next few sessions.
Yep, absolutely. Okay.
So if we kind of dive into some of the topics here, obviously the major point around the whole conference was all of the AI integration that's going on with all of the services, basically. Myself and Nikki have been investing some time lately to get ourselves acquainted with a lot of these services that are coming out directly from Microsoft. We have built up some significant experience over the course of the last year working with different AI solutions. But obviously, since November, since ChatGPT was announced and Microsoft officially made I would say it's really an acquisition. I mean, it's 49%, but they kind of own the company at this point.
Absolutely.
And they steer the strategy there. We're investing heavily into analyzing what benefits this can actually bring, because marketing is one, but the reality is something different, as we know. So we are part of different projects that involve some of these services, specifically the Azure OpenAI service, as part of an enterprise integration and deployment. And throughout the conference, a lot of these have been, you can see how they mature basically in weeks, rather than, we usually have to wait for years for some of these services to mature to that level. But right now, since there's so much involvement from Microsoft and the need is coming from all of their customers, they are putting a lot of effort to get these services in. So I think we will probably add we're going to add a separate category in the next presentations, specifically on AI, like we have for security, because it's becoming its own topic.
Mm-hmm.
Or we may actually spin this up to something completely different. We'll see how it goes. As an initiative.
Yeah. It's
But in summary, it's we are excited. To be honest, it's one of the most exciting things that we've seen in the last, I don't know, ever since we started in IT. And we're trying to get as much as information as possible and being honest in our opinion. It's not, we don't work for Microsoft. It may seem that way sometimes, but we don't.
Yeah.
And we are very critical of some of these services, so we will give our honest opinion. When it comes to the update, sorry.
Yeah, no, just wanted to say that actually we plan to focus a little bit more on AI. As you may notice, there's a separate meetup group already, so you can expect most probably in the middle of next month that we'll start with our first event, where it would be entirely focused on AI stuff, where we will be sharing much more with our experience, our observations, the project that we are working right now on, and we'll be able to see even some demos of the exactly private preview services which are not, let's say, publicly available.
Yeah. As far as the actual updates, they made changes to what they actually announced, the Azure AI Studio, officially, with all of the enhancements that they made. I mean, this was in private preview for a while. A lot of companies have been using it, but they've announced new integrations and mainly around data. We're going to have a separate slide to talk about data today, because there's another significant announcement outside of AI on Build. But things like dedicated and reserved capacity, plugins, and all sorts of things that will expand the reach of the OpenAI service. From what I can see and what we have used so far, This has a lot of potential, obviously. Like Nikki said, we're probably going to talk about the project that we're involved currently, that it's sort of an enterprise level. And I can tell you that most of the companies, although this is probably not being shared publicly, a lot of the companies are actually putting a lot of effort to testing and implementing AI systems at the moment. They've also announced something called AI content safety. With all of the push for AI, you can see there's some backlash of maybe containing the progress a bit because of all the possible outcomes that we have with AI, and it's the way it has escalated lately. So they are trying to do their due diligence by containing the actual process when using AI, and they've implemented something called content safety, which can moderate the way people interact with AI. Prompt engineering, it's sort of a term that's picking up steam lately. People are using it left.
It was a very nice demo by one of the ladies from Microsoft responsible for that, and she shows how you can tweak you have a lot of abilities to tweak the way how the AI responds in order to make it much harder to to trick it, because we've been during the past months we've been observing a lot of demos of different ways and how people are tricking ChatGPT, pretending that they in most cases, yeah, exactly. In most cases, they're pretending that they're trying to do some pen tests, but yeah. So this would become much harder, and the large organization will have much more control of having.
They want to retain. They want to still give the ability for humans to moderate the responses a bit. So
get some governance.
Yeah,
at the end.
Part of the governance strategy overall, but we'll see how it goes. It's still relatively new. There's also an emerging industry, I would say, related to AI security. If you want to, because this will be AI, especially prompts, will become prominent across all of the applications that we use, and we want to make sure that this open channel doesn't exploit or doesn't, give ability to people to get information they're not supposed to get.
Yeah.
Vector search in Azure Cognitive Services is also coming in preview. It allows developers to store, index, and search by keywords using organizational data, which is not only text, but images, audio, video, and graphs. One of the demos that Microsoft has for Azure OpenAI is to get information from PDF files, index it as a vector, and search within that information. So you can use the ChatGPT model to receive much better responses compared to a standard bot that we have. So they are adding a lot more into cognitive search because it's sort of right now it's an essential part in most of the POCs that they're doing. And yeah, like I said, they're putting a lot of effort to iron out a lot of these services. I've also added this Microsoft Q&A Assist. It's not technically announced, I think, in build, but it's sort of a parallel announcement, and it's another AI implementation where you can ask an interface to provide you with answers for technical problems. You've probably been on Microsoft forums before, and you're waiting on a Microsoft person or another person to give you a response to a specific issue that you may have with a system that Microsoft supports or owns. So they're looking to not replace, but try and see if this would complement the existing forums and have this direct interaction with AI when it comes to troubleshooting. So There's a lot more announcements when it comes to Azure AI on Build. If you look at the book of news for the event, you can actually get yourself acquainted with the rest of the updates. But this is what I think was one of the more meaningful ones.
And also, yeah, there's also some updates which will dive deeper on the separate session, which entirely focus on this, because there were also a lot of updates which we can't, let's say, tied to any of these domains. There were updates regarding some way of summarizing all the reviews, which was a kind of interesting one, which we most probably will see in all of the major stores, even in Apple Store. We expect to see this pretty soon. So, for example, when you see some product, you got on top of all the comments summarization thanks to some AI about all the comments and what are the pros and cons for this product based on the feedback from people, which is kind of
There's so many applications that this can be as a service can be implemented.
Absolutely. And just not to forget, but one of the main idea was that everybody now can create its own Copilot. For whatever use case they have. So it would be like, and also just a final thing to touch, they've done pretty nice thing with the plugins. So the developers would be able to develop plugins which can be used not for specific Copilot, but through all the Copilots, which is also, I would say, pretty amazing. So moving forward.
So the next announcement, I think this was the most, outside of AI, which is obviously a buzzword, this was the most interesting one that I saw. It's called Microsoft Fabric, and it's basically a SaaS service that combines the things they already had as part of their data stack, like data warehousing services to get data in, analysis and visualizations. They're providing this as an all-in-one solution, along with its own managed data lake called OneLake. And I think this got the attention a lot of the data analysts. I saw many reviews, and people were responding to the presentation. Now, obviously, this is not out yet. Although I saw, at least in my Power BI tenant, I saw that we have a switch that this will be enabled somewhere in July by default. And pretty much new workspaces and new identities will be created in Fabric rather than a separate solution. So I'm expecting this to be pushed out fairly quickly. But what really caught my attention, and I think this was noted in other reviewers as part of the post-conference analysis, was the ability to do shortcuts to other clouds, because typically, especially for data analysis, you would have multiple places where you store your data. It may be, but a lot of the bigger companies don't have everything at Microsoft. They use AWS, maybe they use other data lakes. And what they provided is the ability to do shortcuts to these clouds, let's call them clouds in this case. And you can seamlessly reach out to their information directly through Fabric. So you don't have to copy the data first to a storage account or the data lake solution that they had previously. This is able to use connectors over to these clouds, and that information will be seamlessly integrated with the rest of the stack. Also, one of the other points that I saw, you can actually work with that information directly from Windows. It's like an attached shortcut in OneDrive, but you can actually view the information in OneLake, which makes it even more easier to kind of manage it when we're talking about structured data, of course. and unstructured. The next one is the Azure deployment environments. This one was, I think, the official announcement mentioned that this was something that they've been working on as a strategy for a while. And I think they said 7 years in the making until we got to this point. It started with something called Azure Dev Test Labs, if you remember that.
Yeah.
And the push to get everything, the push to get organizations to use infrastructure as code, more or less has been a journey for everyone. And now we got to a point where platform engineering is actually the new terminology that people like to use, sort of the new thing, replacing DevOps and Agile and, well, not Agile, but if you think about if you're a developer and the problems you had with the DevOps process, they're trying to get to the next level by implementing the system where you have more or less full control over the provisioning. Not full control, but you can actually provision a lot of the services on your own directly through a catalog. And at the same time, this is integrated with the governance practices that the organization has. So, from one perspective, the admins will be happy. So they contain this whole process. And on the other hand, developers are still free. And not only developers, platform engineers. This can be a number of different roles in the org. They can contribute to the way provisioning is being done because it's only being used through templates, Bicep, ARM templates, Terraform support is coming as well. So this way, we have even a better structured process for creating resources, and at the same time, we don't wait for things like processes in IT to get something provisioned. So I think that's a major announcement. I already saw it in the tenant, by the way, so I think it's available. It's free, which is obviously good if you don't have to pay for this. It's out of the box. Probably there will be some significant effort to get it configured and get it set up. But as part of an adoption strategy, this will probably be something that needs to be considered going forward.
Especially if your organization is not that mature or you don't plan to involve external companies to help you with that. It's something which can get your hands dirty pretty quickly.
Yeah, especially for development environments, POC environments, and you want to trash them and create them and make changes to them without going through much of the infrastructure. I think it would be a good.
Yeah, we'll see how it's going. It's in general, it's not that popular, at least what I've seen in large organization. But I think you mentioned it sounds pretty good for non-mature organizations or teams of developers, etc. Where, for example, a good way to utilize their Visual Studio subscriptions, for example.
Yep.
Okay.
Moving on to the
plugins amplify the transformative power of Microsoft 365 Copilot.
Sorry. I wanted to make things a bit more interactive today, so I included the video for the Copilot. But see if we can mute this one.
I guess.
I think PowerPoint doesn't like YouTube too much. I mean, it was working, but anyway, we're doing this on a Mac, so you can excuse us. Yeah, there's a video for the Copilot. If you want to look at the official website. And what they announced on, so we've done a couple of sessions previously for Copilot. We've talked about its development up to this point. So what they announced on Build was the new extensibility model, which basically allows M365 Copilot to leverage existing extensions and plugins that are available throughout the different services like Teams message extensions or the Power Platform connectors and interact with the data on behalf of you. So it's not only a matter of prompt engineering in M365 where you ask questions and you get a response, or you let me create this Word document for you. Now I can actually go in things like Teams and respond to messages or interact with a SaaS service that already has a plugin. So it's been sorry, maybe we can mute this one. Maybe you just mute the Mac.
Yeah, but it stopped. It's not playing anymore.
Oh, okay.
Stop.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, now it may.
Yeah, forget it. I mean, it's like I said, PowerPoint is not the best on Mac. And it's I think this will provide even more opportunities, especially if you have done some development on M365 as a platform. The creation of Teams apps has never been easier. We actually have the next slide comes with more information on this. How we can leverage the ChatGPT model and what Microsoft already has to create an even better bot to what we had previously as an integration. If you've been using Power Virtual Agents or the things that have been a technology when it comes to chatbots that have been the recommended technology up to this point, probably we'll have to rethink the strategy now, just because the integration with the AI libraries in Teams will make it even a better experience. Now, this is still unknown how much it will cost, because a lot of these events, they specifically talk about marketing. When you ask questions about what licenses do we need to run this, we get the generic answer like, this is still in preview. We'll let you know once it becomes GA, this sort of thing. But if you look this from the perspective of what it can do, yeah, it has a lot of potential. The Azure OpenAI service opens up things tremendously. And you have to host your own model, so the incurred cost will be there, starting with the infrastructure and anything else that Microsoft Teams requires. But overall, a lot of new integrations with M365. The plugins are definitely something that will have a very profound effect of all the things that can be established. Because if you remember when ChatGPT was announced and people started using it, at some point plugins were enabled as part of the experience, and this made developers go crazy, because this meant they can connect their systems directly to the AI model, and that could actually do something in a totally different system. It won't be just the prompt. So Microsoft is going to be using the strategy across all of their products. And at some point, I think a lot of these software products will just have a prompt where you narrate what you want to do, and everything else will be done based on APIs and what you have connected. I think the next one may also be a presentation.
Sometimes hybrid meetings can feel a little impersonal.
Hello?
We can just, maybe we can just do this one then. Will it actually run?
We can continue.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, it's not playing nice today with PowerPoint. So the next one is Microsoft Mesh. And this was announced in Ignite last year, sort of their response to the whole Facebook metaverse thing that they were announcing. And after the whole AI boom started in November, this mesh thing went down the priority list. But there were some new announcements on Build. You probably, if you're a heavy user of Microsoft Teams, you probably saw that you have avatars now, unless your organization decided to stop them for some reason. And this was basically one of the announcements. It's GA. You can do avatars. How useful it is, I mean, I will leave you to judge. It's maybe just to kind of break out from the norm using webcams or having no representation on a meeting. Some people are shy. They prefer to do a virtual identity, and maybe an avatar would be a replacement.
We'll have some fun.
Personally, I don't see too much point in this because it's not really connected to your presence. It's not like in iOS where it actually picks up your facial expressions and presents them through the virtual identity. It's more or less just listening to your voice and waves its hands and mouth sporadically, which is, I don't know. To me, it's a bit.
Maybe it will become better. Yeah. I see.
But the more important update was around this immersive spaces where sort of a virtual meeting presentation, like a virtual world, if you remember that video from Ignite, where people are just flowing through the air and they can meet up in different places, especially with remote work. This is an interesting experience. I saw that a couple of companies have been invited into a private preview, and they shared that it was they found a reason to use it, and it's been leveraged, especially in the orgs where remote work is the norm. This makes things more inclusive and kind of breaks out from the standard meetings that most people do. Yeah, at least this one is in voice. So moving on to the Power Platform. So another AI announcement, AI in Power Pages. If you remember, Power Pages was a service on the Power Platform where you can create public websites as part of maybe an application rollout, and it can be connected with the rest of the Power Platform. It used to be called Portals. Now it's more or less Power Pages have replaced this functionality, and they even implemented the Copilot experience into the building process. So if you want to create a website, you can ask Copilot to help you with getting things into the interface, providing wording for your website, and just being able to go to help you with kind of the building experience directly into the Maker portal itself. Because obviously you can open up ChatGPT and ask prompts and get some information back. And also integrates with Power Virtual Agents. You can implement a bot which can use the native Power Platform component to have a bot experience. Maybe if you have a sales site, a chatbot will show up. What do you want to know about our product? This sort of a thing. It can be done directly in. You can basically create a page in Power Pages in a day, where we used to. I was part of a project that we hired an external company to kind of go through and creating all the artifacts and doing Dataverse and all of the development process, and this can be done fairly seamlessly through Copilot. Okay, the other one on the Power Platform is the thing that I mentioned at the start, the catalog. So whoever has dealt with the Power Platform overall knows that one of its major pain points is, since it's a low code, no code platform, you basically allow people to kind of create solutions and nurture their self-development and progress. But governance is one major issue when it comes to that. So what they've implemented is a way to provide a catalog back to new developers and makers, which can contain components that are usually redundant a lot of the times. I mean, people, if you look at your standard organization, you will see how many people want to just have a simple flow where they get data from an email and they store it on a SharePoint site. And this usually takes hours for people to start with this, to get it completed. Maybe they watch a video somewhere, or maybe they will ask an AI bot to help them out. What this can do is you can actually have a catalog where some of these components, especially the ones that are being used a lot in the org, can be created by IT and provided back as a solution. So you would go into the catalog, you will click a button, and this will get added into a Power Automate flow or a specific custom connector, maybe to your SQL database or data lake or something. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time as a new starter. We wanted to do something similar a few years ago, creating something custom like a SharePoint site, which will store zip files with these solutions. This makes it much more easier to manage, and it's maintained by Microsoft, and you only add the code, which is for usability purpose perspective, I think it's very useful. Okay. And the last one on the list, on the Microsoft security front, they initially, when I read this, I thought it was just another rebrand, because they really love to rebrand things over these conferences. Every Ignite, we have something being rebranded. Now this one, Entra is the portfolio for the identity management in Microsoft, which contains things like Azure AD and all of the B2B and B2C capabilities. They've added something called Entra External ID for customers, which by customers they are pointing more to the B2C scenarios. If you've ever been involved in something like this, it's a way to integrate a customer experience, or maybe reuse already available identity management platforms like social networks and others into your code or applications. And what they're doing here is they're rethinking the whole process, and they're providing a framework to how you can build this up from the ground. If you're creating a new application, how this can be natively integrated into your app, basically. They also announced some new terminology called workforce versus customer, and by workforce they mean more or less your internal audience, your internal organization, versus the customer, which is the externally facing ones. How this would reflect to B2B, I saw an FAQ that B2B is not affected yet, but they are pushing everyone who wants to create a new application, let's say an app service or something like a PaaS service in the cloud, and they need to use external identities, especially for a customer situation, like maybe a public website or something that people need to log in and manage identities. They are pushing to use this new framework where all of the governance pieces are directly integrated, and you don't have to kind of match it up with the existing technology. So I expect this to roll over to B2B as well. because there's so many issues with B2B overall in large organizations that really needs to be taken care of. So they're going to be putting more focus on managing external identities as we go.
Yep. So yeah, this was all updates which we would like to share. Of course, there were much more, and as we mentioned, you can expect separate initiative entirely on the focused on the AI world coming into weeks. So yeah, starting with the resource consistency, which is actually our fourth session.
Yeah, since we have people that haven't been part of the previous calls, maybe it's worth mentioning what this is about.
Yep. So I'm sure that most of you are aware of cloud adoption framework. So all the major public cloud providers have their own. In general, it's pretty similar. The main difference is that the different cloud providers are focusing on different, how to say, steps of the journey, and the focus is based on, how to say, their experience, their client. For example, Google is more focusing on how to establish COEs, Cloud Center of Excellence, change management part. Microsoft is more focusing on early stages to define, to align with the business, etc. And DataOS, as the earlier cloud provider, they have a lot of experience providing some, how to say, good examples of successful and not successful cloud adoption. So one crucial part of this, let's say, journey is governance. So usually what happened with the organization is that they adopt the cloud pretty fast. So in some cases, organizations which are born in the cloud, of course, they're focusing more on growth, more on functional requirement of their application. And they were moving so fast that at some point they become, from small startup, they just become large organization which no longer have the policies, not no longer, but actually don't have any framework, policies, practices which they have to follow, which will help them to, have some kind of order in the organization and being able to maintain, things like the cost, to have some guardrails, which will help with the security and all of this stuff. The other examples, which is really frequent as well, is large organization which adopt the cloud and treat it like another data center with mindset which they've been applying to the on-prem. So they have the policies and practices which unfortunately are not tightly aligned with the cloud and the cloud way of thinking, but more like with the on-prem stuff. So in general, governance is coming like after the execution of the plan for the strategy. So it should be early part. So once we prepare the strategy and the plan to execute it, we should start think about the governance part. So what Microsoft suggests and their vision is that governance is separated in 5 disciplines. We've been already dive deeper in the cost management, where we discussed how you can optimize your cost and maintain your cost spending tightly aligned with your actual usage, and the things that are bring value to your organization. Also, we've been talking a lot about the security and identity part, where we shared some best practices, some examples, because really security and identity domains are, how to say, the harder one to adopt from the organizations, at least based on our point of view. And today we'll be diving deeper in resource consistency. And after that, we'll have the deployment acceleration. Important thing here to notice that actually all of these representations are some kind of combination of Microsoft formal approaches, formal recommendation, and our experience. So you can expect our session to be somehow tailored to the Microsoft formal approach, but keep in mind that everything is based on our point of view and is through our vision. It will be presented through our vision. So what is the role of resource consistency? In general, it's really important to be able to understand well what you have in your cloud environment and what is the purpose of each of these resources. We all know that one of the biggest benefits of the cloud, which I really love, is transparency. So in the cloud, it's much easier to understand what is the purpose of each of the resources. Also, it's much easier to to control this this transparency. Since the cloud providers built this from the ground. I can compare this, for example, in the electric cars, where Tesla is building their cars from the ground with the mindset that this would be electric cars. And if you remember, the other vendors have been trying in the beginning of this journey to put electric motors in their old cars, like with combustion engine. So the role of resource consistency in general is to have this transparency in the cloud, to have this to have the resiliency, the way to recover fast, to make sure that your business can continue to work, and in general your resources to stay consistent. So of course, the main benefits of the business is when you have well-ordered environment, it's much easier to your team to operate with. So when people know the owner, the purpose, the function of specific resources, when the teams have a good visibility of its even performance metric, and they have the right information that they care about. For example, especially the product teams, they understand well what is important for the user, and the same is for financial team. They understand well for what they're spending and how they're spending. Of course, this would be very beneficial for the business. So in general, operational efficiency, again, transparency, good understanding of the behaviors of the platform in term connected to the usage from your users and your clients is the major benefit. And it's important to note that actually this discipline, of course, as the others, have this deep impact on the other disciplines. For example, you can immediately connect it with the cost management. So let's talk a little bit more about if we can somehow combine, not combine, but compare governed versus ungoverned environment. As I mentioned in the beginning, there were two examples which we observed in the past, how the cloud have been adopted, and in both examples, unfortunately, having good governed environment is very hard to achieve from the ground, and the outcome from this is that you have a lot of resources which you are not aware of for what they're used, who is their owner, and of course it's really important. What is the thing which can help mostly in this situation? Of course, it's establishment of the right processes, because you can start some initiative to clean something, but if you don't have some process and practices in place, most probably will become in the same situation pretty quickly. And in general, the governance and its main focus is actually to establish the processes which people can follow in order to make sure that the same challenges will not occur again. So what usually happened, we have a lot of orphan resources that people can be used for something they've been abandoned. So the teams have to waste a lot of time to find who is the owner. There were some tricks, not tricks, but what usually people are doing is actually somehow start limiting this resource and its functionality and waiting for someone to, to contact the IT team and asking why this is not working. Unfortunately, sometimes this didn't work because it may be some resource which is used, let's say, once per year, just to run some kind of again, some compliance, for example, licensing audit, and it's at the end, the outcome, of course, is increased cost, non-compliant resources in terms of security, and potential a huge risk for the organization in multiple aspects. Important thing to note here is also that in large organization, sometimes there are these zombies, as I love to say, application which even that people are aware that they're there, nobody have the guts to take care and do something for them, modernize them, and that's one of the reasons why security solutions, which I love to say, offload the responsibilities of the application, are moved to the, let's say, some kind of vendor functionality on back in a way that we can take care of your legacy application, even that they have the functionality. This is nice, but actually the truth is that people don't have the gut to modernize them and do something meaningful. So yeah, in the next slides, we'll start with some, let's say, initial tools that usually we're using in order to have a good governed environment. And of course, the first and most popular one is Azure Policies. As you know, this Azure Policies is the main mechanism in Azure, which is also used by the other domains, especially on the security, make sure that we are compliant with some certificate. And through the Azure Policies, we can have good guardrails, which are tightly aligned with our type of business, our type of compliance standards that we would like to achieve. And they're a great way to make our cloud platform and put everything in order. I think we discussed in one of our previous sessions that Microsoft is already have some good default policies that we can onboard. But of course, it's important to understand that there are some policies which are very specific to our business needs and to our domain, which definitely would be our responsibilities. Important thing to note here about the policies is that it's always better to offload the responsibility of maintaining and updating these policies to Microsoft. So my advice would be just not focusing much on creating custom policy by yourself, but just have a look what are the default policies. Let's say, for example, you can have a look at the previous session around the security and identity when we touch the governance compliance, and in the coming session where we'll talk more about Defender for Cloud and the different compliance standards, which have, of course, they also using policies, and just create the different policies that are suitable for your organization. For example, you can create a policies which limit the specific amount of resources, the type of resources which can be used. It can limit the different regions.
Enforcing tagging.
Enforcing, of course, yeah. We'll talk a bit more about the tagging and appropriate naming convention in the next slides. But yeah, there's in general, the policies are the first thing to know. Another good tool which can be used is, of course, Azure Resource Graph. Thanks to it, you can query and have a look what is the compliance at scale. It's much faster. So, of course, it can be utilized, entities utilized by third-party tools, which are really popular in the large organization, and it doesn't require any effort in order to get this information.
It's like a magnifying glass to the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are some of the, how to say, foundational tools. Of course, you can put a lot more on top of these. It could be custom solution, third party, of course. But again, I guess we've been discussing this multiple times. If you don't need to have this, how to say, multi-cloud or trying to not walk in specific vendor, it's always better to use the native tools. That's what I'm trying to say. So be aware of not having situation that you're walking and you're willing to not be walking, which is very popular at the moment. Okay, how we can manage resource consistency. So in the coming slide, we've been discussing of some of how to say mechanism from Microsoft, which really helps us to navigate easier through our environment and make sure that everything is in order. So we'll see in the next slide how in some best practices, how we can organize our resources. So it's important to leverage to these abilities to use management groups, subscriptions, and make sure that we are tied at our subscription to the management groups. In the past, this was not available. Management groups was not available, so we had just one subscription. The other thing is that it's important for the policies, for example, to make sure that we can start with auditing, and especially in brownfield environment where we're not sure what would be the outcome of these. And also, of course, there's one very big part of this to have a good monitoring strategy in our resources. So moving and starting this topic with the resource hierarchy. Actually, in this screenshot, you can see a snippet from the landing zone, which is, I would say, one of the best, how to say, image, which says the most about, in general, the Azure Cloud Platform and phases, the domains that are important for us in just one image. Here you see one of the important steps of defining well how our resource hierarchy looks like. It's really important to understand what how our it should be tied to our business as usual. But in general, if we're talking about middle to large enterprises, it's good to have separate management group, which will be taking care of the platform functionalities, things like identity, networking part, monitoring, security, etc. Then it's also it would be also good to have like application which / landing zone. management group where we'll be able to put our different products with their different environments. It could be separated even, it could be nested even on more levels. I'm not sure what was the current limitation, but if I remember correctly, it was something 6, or I never had a case with hitting this kind of limitation. Of course, it's important to have the commissioning management group and sandboxes where we can experiment. The main reason of separating this and not using only subscription is because it's much easier to have this continuously compliance. Because, for example, in the platform management group, we'll have totally different policies. We'll have different standards, we'll have different set of accesses, we'll have in general different airbag, which we'll maintain, comparing to the application/blending zones. The same is for sandbox environment, and most probably we would like to have a little bit more freedom. So our policies would allow our R&D teams to experiment and not have to comply much with the same compliance standards that we have. Of course, here we can even in organization which security is really important, they may have even separate management group. For example, it could be for high trust environments where the security is it's really on top level. We can have this separation even based on the geolocations, if you'd like. It really depends on the type.
Corporate structure as well.
Corporate structure as well. It really depends of what we would like to achieve. So we haven't talked, I think we talked about the Conway law in the one of the previous session about the cloud adoption in general, but the hierarchy of the organization is saying a lot about what kind of product this organization can produce. There's no direct connection to this structure, but it's really have to be tied to our main goal and what we would like to achieve from business perspective. But yeah, as you see, Microsoft providing pretty good foundation that can be used. For example, the platform management group is something which came pretty late, and I haven't seen in a lot of organizations, let's say 2 years ago. Tagging strategy. So is another foundation thing. We've been discussing tagging strategy a lot in our cost management discipline of cloud governance, and that's why I mentioned this resource consistency is tightly connected to the tagging strategy. However, the tags can be used for not only for managing the cost, but also for having this accountability. And they are one of the must-have things that we have to adopt from early stages. So as you see here, Microsoft again provided pretty good from baseline guide where we can start. So there's different types of tags. We have functional tags, for example, what we would like to, what is the purpose of this resource. We have classification, for example, if it's it could be public, private, confidential, whatever. We have accounting tags which are more used by the cost management, so we can have department, project, etc.
Cost center.
A cost center, yeah, exactly. We can have actually the tag which shows who is the owner. So let's say partnership tax. The purpose tax is what is the purpose for these resources. And yeah, it's the tags are like the first step for having good order in our large cloud platform. It's very important to usually what organizations are doing. They define that some mandatory tags, which have policies enforced. And in most cases, these tags are, as I mentioned, functional, classification, partnership, and accounting. So it's important to know who is responsible, who is the owner of these resources. If these resources is part of the production or non-production environment, it will have if it's have which department is responsible for it. If it has some classified data, etc. So yeah, it's and then we can have some additional tags which we can use for different purposes, because we can have even some usual organization in the past where, let's say, the cloud platforms were not that mature. A lot of the things like auto shutdown, stuff like that was happening through some kind of automation based on the tags. Also, one very important tag that I would highly recommend is to have the when the resource was created, because this may help how long this resource been, just to remember the zombies.
You can apply up to, what is it, 250?
Yeah, you have enormous amount of tags. And the important thing is that this is per subscription limitation, so you actually don't have having this enterprise scale in mind, using understand that subscription are just folders that you can reuse. It's very important. Hands by hands with the tags is coming the naming convention. Even that in today's world, the most of our operations are leveraging infrastructure as a code, or they're automated. It's still important to have a proper naming convention, which will help easier to navigate through the resources, understand faster their purpose. So here we have one example again from Microsoft, following the best practices, which we can use for the resources. So we can have a resource type, what is the actual workload, what kind of environment is usually Azure region is part of the resources and distance. Important thing here is to know that some of the resources have to be globally unique. Some of the resources have some limitation of the names that we can use. And also from security purposes, it's important for some of these resources, for example, storage account, I would say app services as well, to have some kind of GUID generated and adopting this practice, because sometimes I've seen even large organizations not being able to locked in their resources to their security solution, like a web application firewall or just regular firewall, and guessing what could be the name, you can easily bypass their security measures. So, yep. Moving forward, monitoring strategy is extremely large topic. We can definitely will have some separate session. Microsoft done a lot of nice things in that direction, but having good monitoring strategy is crucial to make sure that you have ordered environment, let's say that way. Because even that you have some policies implemented, you have some convention, there is no way to take care of everything and make sure that everything is compliant without monitoring it. Also, you can be sure that the resources and their behavior are matching the expectation from the client and the business without having good visibility of what actually they're doing. So it's really important first to understand what we have to monitor, what is important for us. It's important to understand that we are not doing monitoring because to do some checkboxes, or we are not following the traditional way of monitoring stuff by, oh, we have to monitor CPU and memory, but we have to sit down with the business, understand what is important for them, and then trying to translate how we can, what kind of technical measures we can, monitor in order to address the concerns from the business. For example, I've seen it's like much more useful to monitor the latency comparing to the CPU and the memory, because usually when we have large latency, we may have the CPU and memory high, but we can have large latency without having memory CPU high. And the latency is, let's say, the easiest way to connect to the customer, not behavior, but experience. So it's definitely, if our application have like high latency, it would be, it's important to monitor. Second very popular thing is that we have a lot of metrics monitored, stored for a long time, and nobody do anything with this. Again, this is, as I love to say, the checkbox adoption. So it's important to have some policies, some practices established in the organization where we can, take some actions on this metrics, or trigger something quick. In nowadays it's pretty easy to, let's say, you have built in even in the majority of the solution auto scale, which can be based on metrics, right? So we can pretty easy translate these metrics and use them in order to respond to specific event. It's also important to measure our metrics to have some kind of, for example, even if we are talking for not that popular security metrics like compliance over time, you have this already, so you can see how your organization become more and more compliant. You can measure how your users expanded during the past few months, or and how this was connected to your resources usage. So it's as you see, all of these again are highly connected with what is important for us. So we don't have to monitor anything which is not important for us. It's really important, and this is tightly connected to the business. The majority of the IT people just keep the business because it's easier, and because usually it's hard to talk with them. At least this was in the past. I hope that in the current days that's not the case. Of course, once we measure and see how the users have been using our application, I can give an example of, let's say, some spikes of our applications. And let's say our current configuration of auto-scaling, we see that there were some amount of users which were not able to get the same experience in the others. So for example, the application weren't able to scale that quickly. We learned that we can have more aggressive rules to this, so be enable the application to scale a little bit more and faster. For example, we can scale with 2 instances, with 1 instances, but we can scale with 10 instances at the same time, So it's important also to take lessons learned. You can have retrospective session, whatever is working for your organization. And of course, based on what we've learned, this will help to improve in general our value that we are bringing to our customers, which usually is also great to be some kind monitored. So to make sure that we understand how we've been improving our solution in general over time. Microsoft, I think, recently announced separate framework about the monitoring. As I mentioned, I promised that we'll do some separate session on that topic. And yeah, so let's move forward. But monitoring is really important in order to make sure that our resources are consistent. Another very huge topic most of you which may come from the on-prem world. This one and the other with backup and recovery are really not something new to you. But what I would say we missed a lot in the past, and I think it's still the communication with the business and finding a good way to make sure that the business understand well in the implication of improving the business continuity and disaster recovery. So if we allow, let's say, the business to choose what kind of availability they would like to have, everybody will say, I want the highest one. So it's important to show them what would be the price for this. Let's say as the first step. And then they will start thinking about, different options. Azure, as the other cloud providers, have pretty they invested a lot, and this is one of their beauties, that we're not responsible for the physical infrastructure, and usually they have multiple data centers / availability zones in each geolocation. There's some exceptions, but in general there are multiple. And they also, in the past years, they invested a lot of different solutions which can make all of these pretty easy to be consumed. All of these services for which can be tightly aligned with our business continuity and disaster recovery strategy. So in terms of tools and services, we'll see more in the next slide, but for this step, I would say the focus should be, again, more created a framework policy which can, so let's say, analyzing what kind of resources are used in your environment, analyze the, let's say, the top 5 use cases of different business continuity and disaster recovery scenarios that you may use, analyze what kind of geolocation are possible in general, because remember, most organizations have this compliance requirement of data residency. So we can, even that is great that all of our storage account could be even geo read access globally available with
GeoZone redundant.
The GeoZone is the new, it's the best one. But yeah, it's sometimes, again, it's limitation, not non-technical limitation. So just focus on the business perspective, speak more with the business, and establish, let's say, 3 or 5 scenarios that people can pick from their organization to use for their application. It's similar to like all the resources in Azure. It's much better to limit the choice in order to have better control and standardization in the entire environment, comparing to the previously in the on-prem, where people can
do whatever they want.
Do whatever they want, exactly. So yeah, again, this can be totally separate session. We can talk a lot more about the different plans, different strategy in that direction. Regarding the backup and recovery, I'm sure that all of you will say that the biggest mistake is that people have good backup strategy, and when we have to restore, then the challenge came. So our advice would be
my favorite quote: "We are a backup team. We're not a restore team."
Exactly. So again, focus on the policies of the process, establish good processes where on whatever meaningful time frame you test. This is also important for the previous slide as well. You should execute and test this business continuity, backup, and recovery stuff. It's also very important to include in these processes the people aspects, because we also seen a situation where we had just 2 people which can restore the database, and for some reason they're not available. So we have to think about this scenario and to think what we should do and how much people would be meaningful based on the criticality of our application and probability that a specific event will happen. So focus not only on the backup, but on the recovery point. And talking about in general backup and recovery and business continuity, Microsoft have also different methods. As you see here, there's a lot of tools that you can use based on the services, based on the, let's say, the layer. But there's also some way which can help us to protect and recover easier. So we can start first again with the importance of our information. So if our information is very important, it's good to tackle it from multiple angles. And I can give you pretty good examples. Microsoft recently introduced these immutable vaults. So if our data is really important and for some reason we can't afford to lose anything, these are a great way to back up the data. However, it's important to consider also a situation where the organization have to be compliant with some standards, so they have to remove the data. So keep in mind that there's some hidden stones because you can't remove the data from the immutable storage. Even that, it's a great way to do it. There's also some tricks that you can use in order to have not backup, pure backup, but let's say good way to make sure that your data would not be lost. Let's say Microsoft introduced the deny policies. I really love them. So you can have better control, and actually you can block the options at all specific, let's say, storage pod to be deleted. I think we discussed this in the past series. And recently Microsoft even added this to their, I think it was conditional access actions, if I'm not mistaken. So we can even put this in order for combined with specific actions, which also will help to our business to continue and not losing data. So I will not going to touch all of the different backup and recovery solution. But again, for these two, it's really important to establish the framework, establish the policies, establish the different options for the different workloads for the organization that can pick based on the criticality of the application, based on the security and compliance standards that they have to meet, and in general, based on what is important for your organization. You have to put clearly in front of the business to understand what would be the impact of having different levels of availability and for their and resiliency for their solution. So even that your organization is not following, let's say, chargeback, at least they should be aware of the showback, because at the end they should take the decision how resilient should be their solution, the product team, and they should be responsible for that decision. This is not responsibility to the IT team, which was the case in the past. And even that there's a lot more to tell about this topic.
RPO, and things.
Absolutely, yeah. These are important metrics that can help us, and we've been using this in the past a lot.
There are multiple things that you have.
There are multiple things. Yeah, there's metrics like SLA, SLO, SLE. In general, site reliability engineering is a huge topic, and usually, in terms of resource consistency, these teams are, are more connected with make sure that the environment is consistent, the environment is performing well, the environment is maintained well in terms of compliance standards and etc. So yeah, that's I think that's
pretty much it.
Yeah, that's it from today. We'd be happy to answer any questions, concerns. You can raise your hand or type in the chat as well. In the meantime, I will mention that actually the images here have been, the majority of them have been used from Microsoft website and have been AI generated through different services, and we have some of the images from freepik.com. Right then,
Okay.
I hope that you found this session meaningful, and yeah, looking forward
To our last one on the governance
and our first one on the AI. Yeah, in the another thing which you may find interested, after 2 weeks from 14, we will be a guest to one event called Microsoft Months, which will be hosted by ITCE, where we'll discuss the based on our experience, a good way for people to make sure that they're current in terms of security and AI, what kind of trainings they can follow, and yeah, how some efficient way to catch up with these really fast developing areas.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.